and which helped make him a friend to bankers and to the United States government. By negotiating large loans from the Rothschilds, he was able to shore up the United States debtor banks. In other words, he was able, thanks to the hugeness of the Rothschild reservoir of capital, to start out in America operating his own Federal Reserve System. Monday, July 26, 2021, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today we're going to talk about the hidden purpose of the Federal Reserve. Most people think that the Federal Reserve is the central bank for the United States. It's the central bank that helps set monetary policy for the United States. That helps keep the banks in check. That helps protect the currency of the United States. That helps the public, right? It's a public institution. It does public good. But I would say this definition couldn't be further from the truth. And I'm going to recommend a very good video today that I found yesterday by someone that I have been following on and off over the years. Recently, I haven't, but this person did a very good video about this Federal Reserve. Apart from being a lot prettier than I am, this person also is very funny, and I think people will enjoy this video. It's 23 minutes long, but she goes over a book, of course, that I've read a few times over the last 15, 20 years, a book that I've recommended to you many times, and it's The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. It's a must-read if you want to find out more about the Federal Reserve and who's really behind it. Yes, there are a few other ones, like the original guy who uncovered some of the secrets of the Federal Reserve. It's the Secrets of the Federal Reserve by Eustace Mullins. That's another very good book. It's harder, probably more expensive to find than The Creature from Jekyll Island. And yes, and I'm gonna tell you, of course, what is the secret really about the Federal Reserve, what their purpose really is, and it's got nothing to do with maintaining price stability. It's got nothing to do with maintaining full employment. It's all to do, I would say, with bailing out the private banks whenever they come into trouble. And what is usually the trouble for private banks, for bankers, for Wall Street? Well, it's greed, it's too much leverage. They're not happy with the original purpose of a bank, which was to store real money for their customers and charge a fee. Maybe lend that money out if your customer said, yes, please lend the money out. And lend it only once, of course. Yes, they got into really bad habits, and those bad habits are still around. Nowadays, the banking system is, it's not really a banking system. There's no money in the banking system. It's all reserves and credit out of thin air that have been created many times over. And that's why I said that maintaining price stability, or the purchasing power of the dollar, is the thing that the Federal Reserve hasn't done since 1913, because you could do a lot more with the dollar back then than you can do now. And if they'd done a very good job, the dollar would still be the same weight and measure that it was in 1913. But they've gradually taken the United States off a sound money footing. That was always the plan. They didn't do it right away, of course. They had to do gradually, pretend it wasn't them doing it. But to show you what I think is the real purpose of the Federal Reserve, and of course I had a feeling that this was it, but I have another book here called Our Crowd by Stephen Birmingham. It's about the great Jewish families of New York. So here it is. I recommend this as well. This book was recommended to me over 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, by Jim Sinclair of jsmindset.com. Jim Sinclair was born a Seligman, so his family is part of this crowd. So he told us, read the book and you will understand what goes on with the Federal Reserve and the monetary system. And I did read the book, but at the time I didn't put two and two together. It was only recently when I reread the book that I found on page 40. And on page 40, they're talking about August Belmont, who was not part of the crowd, but his original name was August Schonberg, and he came from Germany as well to New York. And he arrived, is it a coincidence? He arrived in 1837, just in time for the Panic of 1837. And this book talks about that there are rumors that he was an illegitimate child of one of the Rothschilds of Frankfurt. And he actually started his career at the Rothschild banking institution in Frankfurt. And it was the Rothschilds who sent him to the United States. So this is where I got my eureka moment on page 40 of Our Crowd. In the Panic of 1837, Belmont was able to perform a service which he would repeat in subsequent panics, and which helped make him a friend to bankers and to the United States government. By negotiating large loans from the Rothschilds, he was able to shore up the United States debtor banks. In other words, he was able, thanks to the hugeness of the Rothschild reservoir of capital, to start out in America operating his own Federal Reserve System. So there you go. So what does that mean, in my opinion? Well, it means that anytime there's a banking crisis, a financial crisis, the Rothschilds would come in and help out the system. I'm sure they'd buy a lot of assets on the cheap, and they became like a lender of last resort. Like it had its own Federal Reserve System. So that's what the Federal Reserve System is there for. It's not there to help the public, because we need to understand that until recently, even I think in the 60s or 70s, many people didn't have bank accounts. It was only the very wealthy who had a lot of real money. They needed to store it somewhere safe, so they kept a bank account. But so this was a game for the rich, of course. And over the years, I would say the same people were involved in helping out during the panics. We know that during the Knickerbocker Panic of 1907, it was J.P. Morgan who helped out. But I would say that J.P. Morgan just became a front for Belmont and the Rothschilds. And why do I say that? Well, I'm going to recommend you another book. This book I read like over 25 years ago, maybe even 30. It's called The House of Morgan, The Secret History of Money and Power by Ron Chernow. I highly recommend it. And in this book, you will learn that the origins of the House of Morgan are not in New York. They're in London. And yeah, JP Morgan wouldn't be around either if it wasn't for George Peabody. George Peabody was a banker in London. Many people speculate that he was kind of a cover for the Rothschilds back in the mid-1800s or so, later in the 1860s. And why is that? Well, because of discrimination against Jews in the city of London. So the House of Rothschild, many people speculate that Peabody acted as an agent for them. And Peabody, of course, was an American who came to London. He didn't have any heirs to leave the business to, so he left it to the J.P. Morgan family, to Junius Morgan to be exact. And then Junius Morgan passed it on to J.P. Morgan, and eventually they opened an office in New York. So it all started in London. I can't prove 100% that the Rothschilds are behind the J.P. Morgans, but I would say there's a big chance. I would say they definitely work very closely together. So back to the Federal Reserve. So you had the Knickerbocker bust. That was a trust that failed, and J.P. Morgan again had to organize a bailout of Wall Street. He put a lot of money up, supposedly from his own funds. We don't know where he got the funds. Of course, it could have been some from London. Don't forget, back in 1907, London was still the biggest financial center in the world. The British had the empire. So it's not out of the realms of possibility. And there were other panics. I think back in 1793, J.P. Morgan organized the bailout of the U.S. Treasury. So I think what happened after the Knickerbocker Trust, the crash of 1907, there was the earthquake in San Francisco that some people say triggered it. They decided, we have to maybe get the government to run this bailout or lender of last resort system, get the public to take our losses when we have these panics, and allow us to keep our profits when we inflate bubbles. And I think that's what the purpose of the Federal Reserve is. And 2008 and last year into 2020 prove it in spades that that's what it is. I did a video interview with John Titus of Best Evidence last week, and he speaks about that. Listen to the video. Listen to also his videos he's done in the past. He doesn't do too many videos, but he just shows that whatever the Fed does is not for Main Street, it's for Wall Street. So that's why I think the Federal Reserve, its secret purpose is not what Jay Powell tells Congress, while we're here to help Wall Street. Of course not. So the secret purpose is to be a lender of last resort for private bankers, for speculators on Wall Street, the City of London, and wherever else in the world where there are speculators who are closely tied to these people. And the Federal Reserve has been a great instrument for that, not only because it's helped save the banks many times, but it's also used the public credit to save them. So J.P. Morgan and the Rothschilds haven't had to put any of their money to calm the system down when there are panics. The public has done it without knowing it. What, in my opinion, shows this? Well, in my opinion, the massive national debt that the United States has built since the Federal Reserve was created. I think the national debt was around a few $1 billion back in the early 1900s. Now we're at almost 30 trillion. And the wealth inequality that we're seeing, especially in the last 30 years, that's the result of the Federal Reserve. It has basically left the general public impoverished, and it's made the 1% or the even smaller proportion, maybe the 0.1% on Wall Street in the City of London, wealthy beyond imagination. So that is the true purpose of the Federal Reserve. And before I go, I highly recommend you watch Ashton Birdie's video. It's entitled The Dark Truth Behind the Federal Reserve. She's got 158,000 subscribers, but she's only got 3,800 views for this video, and it was published 12 hours ago. So make sure you watch that. I highly recommend it. Make sure you share it. This message has to get across to the public. And it's a good thing that a young person is looking into this as well, not just an old fogey like me. So with that, let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. It's 8:38 a.m. London time. So we've got spot gold at 18.11. It's up $9 this morning. The high is right here as I speak. The low has been 17.98. Silver is up 20 cents at 25.37. That's up 0.75%. Range has been 25.41 to 25.10. The Dow future is down 180 points or 0.5%. The NASDAQ 100 future is basically unchanged. S&P 500 future is down 15 points or 0.5%. To the currencies, sterling is up 0.2% at 137.70. The euro is at 118. That's up 0.25%. The dollar is down 0.33% versus the Japanese yen at 110.15. The dollar is up slightly versus the yuan at 648.30. Aussie dollar is down 0.2% at 73.52. And the dollar is unchanged versus the Canadian dollar at 125.63. WTI crude is down 1.3% at $71. High-grade copper is up 1% at $4.45. To finish off, the 10-year Treasury yield is down substantially overnight. It's down 5 basis points at 123. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And you can also follow me on Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, and all these other platforms below here. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.